It's like you blink and suddenly the tech world's obsessed with something new. One minute it's all about the metaverse. The next, it's AI this, AI that.
Yeah, keeping up can be a full-time job.
For real. So today, we're going to deep dive into a topic that I know a lot of you are curious about, and that's AI chatbots. Specifically, we're going to be looking back at a 2023 study called Artificial Intelligence AI-Based Chatbot Study of ChatGPT, Google AI Bard, and Baidu AI, published in the World Journal of Advanced Engineering, Technology, and Sciences.
This study is a really interesting snapshot, a time capsule almost, from that pivotal year when things really started heating up in the chatbot world.
Yeah, it's like our cheat sheet to understanding the landscape back then,
Yeah.
the big players, the technology, the possibilities, and hopefully it'll help us make sense of where we are now. So no need to dig through all that research yourself. We've done the heavy lifting.
Exactly. We've distilled all the key insights, the juicy stuff, so you can sit back, relax, and get the full picture without getting bogged down in the technical jargon.
Okay, so let's rewind back to 2023. When people talk about AI chatbots then, one name was on everyone's lips: ChatGPT.
ChatGPT really was the name that burst onto the scene.
And this study frames it as a really, really powerful language model developed by a company called OpenAI. Can you break down for us what made it so special? What was the tech behind its, magic?
Well, the secret sauce, so to speak, was the Transformer network.
Okay, Transformer Network. Sounds kind of sci-fi, but go on.
It is pretty futuristic when you think about it. This particular architecture, it first appeared around 2017, and it proved to be incredibly effective for natural language processing, or NLP as it's known.
NLP, so that's basically teaching computers to, understand and work with human language, right?
Exactly. And the Transformer network was a total game changer for NLP. It just blew older approaches out of the water.
Like what? What kind of older approaches?
Well, before Transformer networks, a lot of NLP relied on things like recurrent neural networks, RNNs for short. These RNNs, they processed information in a much more linear, step-by-step kind of way.
So kind of like reading a sentence one word at a time.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Transformer networks could look at the whole sentence, even a whole paragraph, all at once.
So big picture thinking versus just focusing on the details.
You got it. It was like a team of experts tackling different parts of a problem simultaneously, rather than one person trying to do it all by themselves. This parallel processing was what allowed ChatGPT to make those big leaps in understanding complex relationships between words and concepts.
It's almost like it could see the whole forest instead of getting lost in the trees.
That's a great way to put it. But it wasn't just the architecture that made ChatGPT so powerful. This study also talks about the absolutely massive amount of data it was trained on.
Okay, we're talking like mountains of data.
Think like the entire Library of Congress, but online.
Whoa.
They fed it books, articles, websites, all sorts of digital text, essentially a huge chunk of the internet up to 2021.
Oh, so anything that happened after 2021, ChatGPT wouldn't have a clue about.
Right, that's a really important point. It's like its knowledge was frozen in time.
Like a digital time capsule.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be a limitation, especially in rapidly evolving fields. But back to the training. They basically set ChatGPT this challenge: predict the next word in a sequence. So it's constantly trying to guess what comes next, what word follows the previous one. And by doing this over and over again with this huge mountain of data, it started to learn the patterns and the nuances of human language.
So it learned by reading, basically the whole internet.
You could say that, and all that learning seems to have paid off. This study shows ChatGPT was put through its paces against a bunch of other language models.
Sort of like an AI Olympics.
Kinda, and ChatGPT consistently came out on top, especially in tasks like answering questions and categorizing text.
Impressive. But all this technical stuff's great, but what could ChatGPT actually do in the real world, practically speaking?
Yeah, the study gives us some great real-world examples. One big area was customer service, where it had the potential to provide instant answers to customer questions, 24/7, no breaks needed.
Always on duty, no coffee required.
Exactly. It could also make customer service way more efficient, handling tons of inquiries simultaneously.
No more waiting on hold forever.
Exactly. Another area where it showed promise was content creation. Think writing articles, summarizing long documents, even doing translations.
Wow. So it could be like a multilingual journalist.
Kind of. It could even be a personal assistant, helping with things like scheduling appointments, managing emails, the everyday stuff, and even for a bit of fun, like telling jokes or doing trivia.
So ChatGPT was this multi-talented AI, but where did the researchers see this all going? What did they think the future held for these language models?
They predicted a few key things. First, they said we'd see even greater accuracy and responsiveness. Basically, as these models get trained on even more data and the training methods themselves get more sophisticated, they're going to become even better at what they do.
So smarter and faster, basically.
Yeah, and they also saw this really interesting convergence happening with other emerging technologies.
Right, like what?
Well, they specifically mentioned things like virtual reality and augmented reality. They could see these language models being used to power things like real-time captions in VR or voice navigation in AR.
So, like, you're in a VR world, and this AI is narrating everything you're seeing or guiding you through it with voice commands.
Exactly. They even talked about the potential for these models to move into really crucial areas like healthcare, finance, even education.
Whoa, so like an AI doctor, financial advisor, or even a teacher.
Well, maybe not replacing them entirely, but certainly assisting them. Imagine an AI helping to diagnose patients, or giving personalized financial advice, or even grading student essays. The possibilities were pretty mind-blowing.
Sounds almost too good to be true. But I'm guessing there were some downsides too, right?
Of course. No technology is perfect, and ChatGPT definitely had its limitations back then.
Okay, so spill the tea. What were they?
Well, one big one was its lack of what you might call, like, conversational memory.
Conversational memory, huh?
Yeah, like in a back-and-forth conversation, ChatGPT could sometimes lose track of what had already been said. It might forget earlier parts of the conversation.
So like talking to someone who has a really short attention span.
Kind of. It could make for some pretty frustrating conversations.
I can imagine. What else? What were some other limitations they identified?
Another big one was its lack of common sense.
You'd think an AI trained on the entire internet would have a bit more common sense.
You'd think so, right? But even with all that data, it still struggled with basic real-world logic. Like it might generate a sentence that was grammatically perfect and even sounded relevant, but then you'd realize it just didn't make any sense in the real world.
Oh, I see. So it could be grammatically correct,
Yeah.
but factually wrong or just logically inconsistent.
Precisely. And that could be a real problem in some of those more sensitive applications we talked about, like healthcare or finance. You wouldn't want an AI giving you medical or financial advice that's based on faulty logic.
That's for sure. And what about personalization? Like, could it remember your preferences or tailor its responses to you as an individual?
That was another limitation back then. ChatGPT wasn't really designed for deep personalization. Couldn't really remember who you were, what you liked, what you talked about before. So every interaction was kind of like starting from scratch.
Makes sense. It was still pretty early days for all of this. So we've talked a lot about ChatGPT, but the title of the study mentions a couple of other names too. And one that's been making a lot of headlines lately is Google's Bard.
Right, and this study actually captures the very moment when Bard entered the scene. It was officially announced on February 7th, 2023, and Google was very clear. They were positioning Bard as a direct competitor to ChatGPT.
So the AI battle lines were drawn.
You could say that. The study even quotes Google's CEO describing Bard as this, like, conversational AI service that could break down complex topics and make them easy to understand.
So it was aiming to be like your friendly AI explainer. But didn't Google take a bit of a different approach with Bard's rollout compared to how OpenAI launched ChatGPT?
You're right, there was a difference. Initially, Google gave access to Bard to a select group of testers. It was kind of like a closed beta program. They wanted to get feedback from this smaller group before releasing it to the wider public. Whereas OpenAI went with a more open approach, letting anyone who wanted to give ChatGPT a try.
Interesting. So two very different launch strategies.
Yeah.
And what was Google's main goal with Bard, according to the study?
Well, the Google CEO said something really interesting. He described Bard as a launchpad to help you answer your questions and to help you understand new things.
So not just giving you answers, but also helping you learn and explore. I like that.
Me too. And there's this other really interesting point this study makes about a potential advantage Bard had over ChatGPT.
What's that?
Remember how we talked about ChatGPT's knowledge being kind of stuck in 2021 because of its training data?
The time capsule effect.
Exactly. Well, Bard, since it was powered by Google's own language model, LaMDA, had the potential to tap into much more up-to-date information.
Because Google has, like, the entire internet at its fingertips.
Right. So if you were looking for information on something that happened after 2021, Bard might be a better bet than ChatGPT.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So LaMDA, this is the brain behind Bard, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else did the study tell us about it?
Well, it's described as this conversational neural language model specifically designed for dialogue, for back and forth conversations. It's interesting because when Google first launched Bard, they actually used a lighter, less computationally intensive version of LaMDA.
So kind of a scaled-down version. Why do you think they did that?
Probably a couple of reasons. It allowed them to get Bard into the hands of more pesters without needing a ton of processing power.
So more feedback, more data, faster development.
Right. Plus, they were probably still figuring things out with LaMDA, tweaking it, refining it, so starting with a lighter version made sense.
So it sounds like Bard was all about combining power, intelligence, and this constant learning from user interactions and the web, like a never-ending feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly. And that really plays to Google's strengths, right? They're all about search, about information retrieval, about connecting people with the right information.
Makes sense. But it's interesting how different their approaches were. ChatGPT, anyone could try it, play around with it. Bard, it was more of a controlled, exclusive kind of thing.
Yeah, very different strategies. And it'll be interesting to see how those strategies play out in the long run.
It's like watching a chess match unfold.
Okay, so you've got ChatGPT, we got Bard. But the study also mentions another big name entering the AI chatbot arena, Baidu.
Ah, yes. Baidu, the Chinese tech giant. They didn't want to be left out of the AI party.
And their strategy, at least according to this study, was all about integration.
Integration with their existing services, that is. They were planning to bake their AI chatbot right into their main search engine.
Smart move, considering how dominant they are in the Chinese search market. Absolutely. And this study even takes a moment to kind of remind us what makes these language models so unique. They can pull information from vast databases like a search engine, but they can also generate original content like a writer.
It's like they blended the best of both worlds.
Exactly. And that's what makes them so powerful, so potentially transformative.
So to wrap things up, what are the key takeaways from this 2023 study? What should we remember about this moment in time?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that this was a real turning point. ChatGPT showed us what was possible, Google responded with Bard, Baidu jumped into the fray, and it was clear that AI chatbots were going to be a huge deal.
A real game changer. And what about the bigger picture? What did the researchers say about the potential impact of all of this?
They believed, and I think they were right, that these AI language models could fundamentally change how we interact with technology.
So less typing, more talking to our devices.
Potentially. More natural, more intuitive interactions. It's exciting to think about where it could all lead.
It really is. So you've been with us on this deep dive into the world of AI chatbots back to 2023. We've seen how it all began, the key players, the technology, the possibilities, and it's amazing how much has changed in just a couple of years.
It's incredible how fast this field is moving.
And here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to ponder. Given everything we've discussed, the rapid development, the intense competition, where do you think all of this is headed? How do you see AI chatbots shaping our future? Think about the convenience they offer, the potential risks, the ethical questions they raise. It's a conversation that's just getting started.
It's a conversation that's going to define the next chapter of technology.
Absolutely.